Rich CEO SLAPS Royal Guard for not bowing to him. But no amount of money can erase what happens next. Money was his language, influence was his strength, and pride was his constant companion. He was used to arriving at places and having everyone bow to his status. Whether it was a corporate meeting, a five-star hotel, or a gala dinner, the world seemed to bend at his feet. But today, Arjun was about to face a reality he had never encountered before. He had arrived in a distant kingdom for a crucial business deal. The kingdom was known for its rich culture, royal traditions, and strict adherence to honor. Arjun's company had been negotiating for months with the kingdom to invest in a new trade project, and this was his chance to impress the royal family and secure a historic contract. He expected everything to go smoothly. After all, he had wealth, charm, and experience on his side. As Arjun's black luxury car drove through the massive palace gates, a sense of excitement filled his entourage. The sun reflected off the marble walls of the palace, and the gardens seemed to sparkle in every direction. But Arjun's eyes were not on the beauty of the palace, they were on the people. He noticed the guards standing at attention, their uniforms immaculate, their expressions serious. And then his gaze fell on one guard in particular, Rayan. Rayan was not just any guard. He was young but had a presence that demanded respect without needing words. His posture was rigid, his eyes focused, and his face held a quiet dignity. He was different from the ordinary palace guards, and most importantly, he did not move a single muscle when Arjun expected him to bow. Arjun's lips curled into a frown. "Why is he not bowing?" he asked, his voice cold, sharp, and demanding. His assistant stammered, trying to explain that the palace had its rules and the guard was following protocol. But Arjun was not used to excuses. In his world, people followed his commands or faced consequences. He stepped out of the car, adjusting his expensive suit, and walked toward the guard with a controlled anger that could intimidate anyone. The entourage followed, whispering nervously among themselves. Arjun was known for his temper when things did not go his way. "Sir," one of the assistants said cautiously, "he is a royal guard. He is following the rules of the palace." Arjun laughed, but it was not a pleasant laugh. "Rules? I am the one who matters here. Rules are for ordinary people. Make him understand." Without thinking twice, Arjun raised his hand and slapped Rayan across the face. The sound echoed through the grand courtyard, silencing everyone present. The guard staggered slightly but did not fall. He touched his cheek briefly, feeling the sting, but his eyes did not waver. Time seemed to freeze for a moment. The royal staff who were watching from a distance were stunned. Arjun's entourage looked at each other, unsure of how to react. No one had ever seen the mighty CEO act in such a personal and violent way in public. And yet there was something about Rayan's calm composure that made the situation even more intense. Arjun, his face red with anger and disbelief, demanded, "Do you know who I am? How dare you not obey me?" Rayan, holding himself steady, replied in a firm, respectful tone, "I am aware of your position, sir, but my duty is to the kingdom and the royal family. I follow their rules, not personal whims." For a moment, Arjun's anger transformed into pure shock. He had expected fear, respect, and obedience, not defiance, not dignity. The guard's words struck him like a cold wave. He was not used to someone standing up to him, especially in front of an audience. Arjun's entourage tried to intervene, suggesting apologies or explanations, but Arjun was beyond reasoning. Pride burned in his chest, and humiliation stung worse than the slap he had just delivered. In his mind, the world had to bend to him. That was the way life worked. That was the truth he had always believed. But here, in this distant kingdom, reality was different. The royal palace was silent now. Only the birds in the gardens and the distant hum of palace life could be heard. Rayan's calm demeanor became a mirror reflecting Arjun's arrogance, and that reflection was unsettling. Arjun had faced tough competitors, rival CEOs, and hostile negotiations, but he had never faced someone who did not fear him. Trying to regain control, Arjun sneered. "You will bow, you will show respect, or you will regret this." Rayan shook his head slightly, still calm. "Respect cannot be forced, sir, and I serve with honor, not fear." The words were simple but powerful. Arjun realized that no matter how much he shouted or demanded, he could not bend the guard's will. His mind raced. Money, influence, threats. None of them worked here. This was not his world, and for the first time in a long time, Arjun felt powerless. The tension in the courtyard was palpable. Arjun's anger and frustration clashed with Rayan's calm dignity, creating an invisible storm that everyone present could feel. Even the guards around them, who had never seen a civilian act so arrogantly, felt a mixture of fear and admiration. Fear for the boldness of the CEO, admiration for the courage of the young guard. Arjun, realizing that physical intimidation had failed, tried a different approach. He leaned in closer, lowering his voice, hoping that intimidation mixed with his reputation would work. "Do you know what I can do? I can ruin careers, destroy empires, and make life miserable for anyone who opposes me. Do you understand me?" Rayan met his gaze without flinching. "I understand, sir, but threats cannot change what is right." The silence that followed was heavier than any argument. Arjun's face twisted in disbelief. This young man, standing firm, had shattered the world Arjun had built for himself, a world where money, influence, and fear dictated behavior. As the CEO struggled to regain his composure, the royal officials watching from the palace windows began to murmur quietly. They had seen many things in their service, but a foreign guest publicly slapping a royal guard was unprecedented. Yet the guard's courage was even more remarkable. Rayan's actions reminded everyone present that some things were beyond price, beyond power, and beyond fear. Arjun's entourage, sensing the escalating tension, began whispering to him, "Sir, maybe we should apologize. Perhaps the guard will accept compensation." But Arjun's pride would not allow it. "No, I will not apologize. He will see who I am. He will learn respect." What he did not yet realize was that respect could not be demanded. It could not be bought. And in that moment, as he glared at the guard who refused to bow, Arjun was on the cusp of a lesson that wealth alone could not teach. The courtyard remained silent, except for the soft breeze rustling through the trees. Arjun, frustrated and confused, realized that this kingdom operated on a different set of rules. Wealth did not grant him power here. Influence did not intimidate anyone. And no slap, no threat, no arrogance could erase the dignity of someone committed to honor. For the first time, Arjun Verma, the mighty CEO, felt small. And that feeling was only the beginning. After the incident at the palace gates, Arjun Verma returned to his luxury car, his face still flushed with anger. His mind was racing with disbelief. How could a simple guard, a young man with no wealth or power, refuse to bow or show respect to him? In Arjun's world, everyone had a price, and respect could always be bought with enough money. Yet here, in this distant kingdom, none of that seemed to work. Arjun's entourage whispered among themselves nervously, unsure how to handle the situation. His personal assistant tried to calm him down. "Sir, maybe we should offer him compensation, something generous. It could smooth things over." Arjun shook his head violently. "Compensation?" He slapped me with his defiance. "Money? Do you think money can erase humiliation? No, he will learn respect the hard way." Despite his anger, Arjun was practical. He knew that maintaining his image was important, especially in a foreign kingdom where his reputation could affect business deals. He had to act, and he decided that the best way to assert control was to offer Rayan a huge sum of money, a gesture that, in Arjun's mind, would show generosity while demanding acknowledgement. The next morning, Arjun returned to the palace, dressed impeccably in a designer suit, carrying a leather folder filled with documents and hidden within a bank check of unimaginable value. His entourage followed closely, but Arjun moved with a new determination. He had faced resistance before and had always won, and he intended to do so again. He requested a private meeting with Rayan, and after a short wait, the young guard appeared. His uniform was spotless, his stance steady, and his expression calm. There was no fear, no hesitation, only a quiet dignity that unsettled Arjun even further. Arjun opened the folder, pulled out the check, and placed it on the table. "Take this," he said firmly. "It is more money than you could ever imagine. Consider it an apology for the incident yesterday, but know this, I expect your acknowledgement. You will respect me for what I am. That is not optional." Rayan glanced at the check without a hint of surprise. His hand hovered over it, but he did not touch it. "Sir," he said politely but firmly, "I cannot accept this. Respect is not something that can be bought. My honor and duty are worth more than any sum of money." Arjun froze. The words hit him like a thunderbolt. He had offered more money than most people would see in a lifetime, yet the guard refused. How could someone say no to such a fortune? Arjun's mind refused to process it. He had faced tough competitors, demanding clients and hostile negotiations, but never someone who refused wealth outright. Arjun leaned back in his chair, frustration boiling. Do you have any idea what you are turning down? This could change your life. Houses, cars, wealth, comfort, you could have everything you ever dreamed of, and yet you choose this. He gestured at the palace around them as if the whole world belonged to him. Rayan remained calm. I am aware, sir, but my life is not measured by money or comfort. My duty, my honor, and my principles guide me. That is the life I choose. Arjun could feel a strange mix of anger and admiration. He had never met someone who valued integrity over wealth. In his world, that was almost impossible. And yet here was Rayan, standing firm, unshaken, and untempted. Then you leave me no choice, Arjun said, his voice hard. I will make you understand. I will not let this disrespect go unanswered. Rayan's eyes met his, steady and unwavering. Sir, I do not seek conflict. I am only following my principles. I hope you can understand that. The conversation ended there, but the tension lingered. Arjun left the palace that day feeling both humiliated and fascinated. He could not understand the world where money and power were not the ultimate authority. He was used to controlling situations, bending people to his will, and getting instant results. Here, none of that worked, and for the first time in years, Arjun felt powerless. That evening, Arjun paced in his hotel suite, replaying the events in his mind. Every scenario he imagined, threats, bribes, apologies, seemed futile. He realized that he was dealing with something far greater than money or influence. Rayan's refusal was not an act of rebellion, but a reflection of a value system that Arjun had never experienced. Unable to sleep, Arjun called his closest advisors. I need a plan, he said, voice tight with frustration. This is not about business anymore, it is about respect. He must understand who I am. The advisors hesitated. They were used to solving problems with money, strategy, or connections, but Rayan was different. Sir, one of them said carefully, perhaps we need to reconsider. The guard is loyal to the kingdom. Money may not change that. Arjun slammed his hand on the table. I don't care about loyalty to the kingdom. I am offering him the chance of a lifetime. If he refuses, the fault is his, not mine. We will find a way. Despite his anger, Arjun was also curious. He began to observe Rayan from a distance, watching how the young guard moved through the palace, interacted with others, and performed his duties. Every action Rayan took was disciplined, precise, and respectful, but always dignified. He did not seek attention, he did not flaunt his position, yet there was a quiet authority about him that even Arjun could not deny. Arjun's fascination grew into an obsession. He had always believed that wealth and power could solve everything. But here, in this foreign kingdom, he faced a challenge that no amount of money could overcome. Rayan's integrity, honor, and loyalty created an invisible barrier around him, one that Arjun could not breach. The next day, Arjun attempted a different approach. He sent lavish gifts to the palace, hoping to impress the royal family and indirectly influence the guard. Precious gems, expensive artwork, and rare artifacts arrived at the palace doors, each accompanied by letters of apology and requests for reconciliation. The palace officials received the gifts politely, but returned the letters unopened. Rayan continued his duties as if nothing had happened, unaffected by the gestures meant to sway him. Arjun's frustration reached new heights. He had spent millions to assert his dominance, and yet the guard remained unmoved. It was a lesson in humility, though Arjun refused to admit it. For the first time, he was forced to confront the fact that money, no matter how vast, could not buy respect or erase an affront to honor. Days passed, and the story of the incident began spreading throughout the kingdom. Local citizens and palace staff whispered about the bold CEO and the young guard who had refused him. Rayan's calm defiance earned admiration quietly but firmly. People began to see that some things were beyond price, and that courage and integrity could not be bought or intimidated. Arjun, meanwhile, continued to struggle with his pride. He tried every tactic he knew, friendly gestures, polite explanations, subtle threats, but nothing worked. Each failure added to his frustration, forcing him to question his understanding of the world. He began to realize that his usual methods, money, influence, and intimidation, had limits. In this kingdom, values and honor were stronger than wealth. One afternoon, Arjun watched from a distance as Rayan helped a fellow guard who had slipped while carrying heavy ceremonial equipment. The young guard did not boast, did not seek recognition, but his actions reflected responsibility, kindness, and leadership. Arjun felt a strange respect building within him, a recognition that true strength was not about power or money, but about character and integrity. Despite this growing admiration, Arjun's pride prevented him from admitting defeat. He still wanted recognition, still wanted the guard to bow, still wanted the world to acknowledge his status. But deep down, he knew that forcing respect here was impossible. The realization was bitter. It challenged everything he had believed about life, success, and authority. By the end of the week, Arjun had tried every approach he could imagine. He had offered money, gifts, apologies, and attempts at persuasion. Each effort had been met with polite refusal or quiet dignity. Rayan remained steadfast, embodying the values that the kingdom cherished. And Arjun, for the first time in his life, began to see that there were forces greater than wealth, forces that could not be manipulated, bought, or intimidated. As Arjun sat in his suite one night, overlooking the palace gardens, he reflected on what had happened. He had come to the kingdom thinking that money was power and that influence could control anyone. But he had been wrong. The young guard had taught him, without a word of anger or defiance, that some things, honor, respect, and integrity, were priceless. Arjun knew that the coming days would test him even further. He had to find a way to navigate this new reality, to reconcile his desire for respect with the limits of wealth, and to understand the world of the kingdom he had entered. The lesson was just beginning, and it was one that would stay with him forever. The arrogance that had once defined him now faced a challenge unlike any he had ever experienced. And though he had not yet admitted it, Arjun Verma was on a path toward transformation, a path that would force him to question the very foundation of his life, his values, and his understanding of power. News of the incident at the palace gates spread quickly throughout the kingdom. People whispered about the foreign CEO who had dared to slap a royal guard, and about the young guard, Rayan, who had refused to bow even under the weight of wealth and power. The story traveled from palace corridors to local markets, from the royal staff to city streets, and soon everyone knew of the confrontation. Arjun Verma, despite his immense wealth and influence, began to realize that the world outside his own empire operated differently. The kingdom was proud of its traditions, its rules, and its honor. Respect was earned, not demanded, and obedience was guided by principles, not fear or money. For the first time in his life, Arjun's power had limits, and he found the feeling unsettling. The royal family, initially silent, began discussing how to handle the situation. They did not want to escalate the conflict, yet they could not ignore the disrespect shown to one of their loyal guards. After careful deliberation, they decided to take action, not with anger or revenge, but with measured authority. Arjun would learn that wealth could not erase wrongdoing or buy respect for actions that violated the kingdom's values. The palace officials imposed subtle but firm restrictions on Arjun. He was no longer allowed to attend certain ceremonial events, nor could he interact freely with influential figures in the kingdom. Invitations were quietly withdrawn, and his presence at important gatherings was limited. These measures were not publicized, but Arjun could feel their effect immediately. Doors that were once open to him were now closed, and influential people who had once sought his favor now maintained a polite distance. At first, Arjun was furious. He had spent millions to impress the royal family, to secure deals, and to assert his dominance. Yet he was now experiencing rejection in a way he had never known. His usual strategies, wealth, intimidation, and charm, failed completely. Every gesture he made to regain favor was met with polite refusal or avoidance. The realization that money and power had limits was a bitter pill to swallow. Determined not to appear weak, Arjun continued his attempts. He sent letters of apology and explanations, hoping that the royal family or palace officials would reconsider. He even arranged for lavish gifts and charitable contributions to be made in their name, believing that such gestures might soften their stance. Yet, the kingdom's values were firm. The gifts were acknowledged politely, but they did not change the stance of the royal family or the young guard. Rayan continued his duties as usual, unaffected by Arjun's efforts. He moved through the palace with calm precision, carrying out his responsibilities with integrity and care. He did not boast, did not complain, and did not seek attention. Yet his quiet presence spoke volumes about the strength of character that could not be influenced by wealth or fear. Every action of Rayan became a living lesson for Arjun, demonstrating that true respect is earned through honor and not commanded through power. The situation also had a ripple effect among the people of the kingdom. Citizens admired Rayan's courage and integrity. They spoke of how a young guard had faced a foreign CEO without fear, how he had remained steadfast in his duty despite being publicly humiliated. Stories of Arjun's arrogance circulated alongside stories of Rayan's bravery, creating a contrast that further humiliated the CEO in the eyes of the kingdom. Arjun, despite his attempts to control the narrative, realized that public opinion was turning against him. He had always believed that money could shape perception, but in this kingdom, integrity held greater sway. The more he tried to assert himself, the more he understood that he could not rewrite reality with wealth alone. For the first time, he began to reflect deeply on his behavior, questioning the arrogance and pride that had defined his life. As days passed, the royal family organized a formal meeting, not as a confrontation, but as a lesson. Arjun was invited to discuss the trade project, yet the atmosphere was different. The palace was calm, dignified, and orderly, reflecting the kingdom's values. The officials spoke politely but firmly, making it clear that respect and honor were paramount, and that Arjun's previous actions were unacceptable. During the meeting, Arjun tried his usual tactics: charm, persuasion, and subtle intimidation, but none worked. Every suggestion he made was met with careful consideration, not deference. Every proposal was weighed on its merits, not on the influence of his wealth. The young guard, Rayan, observed quietly, his calm presence a constant reminder of the principles the kingdom upheld. Arjun realized that he had underestimated the power of integrity and honor. He had assumed that his wealth could command respect, but here, in this kingdom, respect was not a commodity. It was a reflection of character, earned through discipline, courage, and adherence to values. This was a lesson that no amount of money could teach, yet it was now becoming painfully clear to him. Frustration mixed with admiration as Arjun watched Rayan carry out his duties. The young guard's actions were precise, thoughtful, and ethical. He treated everyone with fairness and respect, yet he demanded the same in return. Arjun could see that these qualities had earned Rayan the genuine respect of the royal family, the palace staff, and even the citizens. Unlike wealth, which commanded temporary attention, integrity created lasting influence. Despite his anger and humiliation, Arjun could not ignore the impact of Rayan's behavior. He began observing the guard more closely, noticing the way he managed responsibilities, helped colleagues, and maintained dignity under pressure. Each observation became a small revelation for Arjun. He started to realize that success without integrity was fragile, and that influence without honor was temporary. The palace officials, recognizing Arjun's growing awareness, allowed him to participate in discussions about the trade project, but with conditions. He had to present his ideas clearly, respectfully, and without attempting to dominate the conversation. Arjun, for the first time, had to rely on skill, reasoning, and professionalism rather than wealth or intimidation. This experience, though challenging, began to shift his perspective subtly. Meanwhile, Rayan continued to exemplify the values the kingdom cherished. He did not seek recognition for his steadfastness, yet everyone noticed it. His courage, discipline, and commitment created a quiet authority that no wealth could match. For Arjun, this was both humbling and enlightening. He began to see that leadership and respect were earned through actions, not titles or money. The incident also prompted reflection among Arjun's own team. They had always admired his confidence and power, but seeing him challenged by Rayan's integrity made them realize that true leadership required more than authority and resources. The team started to value character, ethics, and humility alongside skill and wealth. Arjun's confrontation with the guard became a catalyst for change not only in himself, but also in those around him. As weeks passed, Arjun's attempts to regain social favor in the kingdom continued to fail. Invitations were politely declined, meetings were carefully managed, and public interactions remained formal and distant. Each refusal chipped away at Arjun's pride, forcing him to confront the limitations of wealth and influence. He began to understand that respect, once lost, could not be bought back with money. It had to be earned through integrity and ethical behavior. The turning point came during a ceremonial event at the palace. Arjun was allowed to attend, but he was seated at a distance, observing the proceedings quietly. Rayan, as always, performed his duties flawlessly. He guided guests, ensured order, and maintained decorum without seeking attention. The contrast between Arjun's attempts to assert dominance and Rayan's natural authority was stark. Everyone present could see the difference between influence through wealth and influence through integrity. Arjun felt a mixture of frustration and admiration. He realized that while he could buy temporary obedience, he could not purchase genuine respect. He understood that Rayan's courage and honor were priceless qualities that no amount of money could replicate. This realization was both humbling and transformative. In private moments, Arjun reflected deeply on the lessons he was learning. He began to reconsider his approach to life, leadership, and relationships. The arrogance and entitlement that had defined him for years were being replaced, slowly but surely, with introspection and humility. For the first time, he saw value in patience, respect, and ethical behavior. Rayan, unaware of the profound effect he was having, continued his duties as usual. He did not boast about his defiance, nor did he seek acknowledgement. His strength lay in his consistency, discipline, and commitment to principles. For Arjun, observing Rayan became a daily lesson in integrity, a lesson that challenged every assumption he had ever held about power, wealth, and respect. By the end of this period, Arjun had come to a quiet understanding. He could no longer rely solely on money or influence to shape outcomes. He had to engage with people on a deeper level, demonstrating respect, understanding, and ethical behavior. The kingdom had shown him that true power was not measured by wealth but by character and principles. The story of the slap, the refusal, and the lessons learned became a turning point in Arjun's life. It was a reminder that some things, honor, respect, and integrity, were beyond purchase. The consequences of his actions had forced him to see the limits of wealth and the enduring strength of principle. And as he continued to navigate the kingdom, Arjun began to change, slowly, deliberately, and irreversibly. He still had much to learn, and the journey was far from over. But the confrontation with Rayan had planted the seeds of transformation. Arjun's pride had been challenged, his assumptions questioned, and his understanding of respect reshaped. He was no longer just a CEO with wealth and power. He was a man beginning to grasp the true meaning of honor, humility, and influence. Weeks had passed since the incident at the palace gates, yet the memory of that day lingered in Arjun Verma's mind like an unhealed wound. Every time he thought of Rayan standing firm, refusing to bow, he felt a mix of frustration and admiration. The experience had shaken him more than he had expected. The arrogance that had once defined him now clashed with an emerging awareness. Wealth and power were not always enough. True respect was earned, not demanded. Arjun had spent days reflecting on his actions, replaying the events, and analyzing his behavior. He realized that his usual approach, intimidation, money, influence, had failed completely. The young guard had shown him, silently but powerfully, that integrity, courage, and honor could not be bought or coerced. It was a revelation that challenged everything Arjun had believed about life and leadership. The CEO began to observe the palace more closely, not as a conqueror seeking dominance, but as a student trying to understand a world unlike his own. He watched how the royal family conducted themselves, how the guards carried out their duties, and how the citizens treated one another with mutual respect and dignity. It was a society guided by principles, where honor mattered more than wealth, and every action had consequences beyond material gain. Arjun's initial anger had slowly transformed into curiosity. He found himself studying Rayan's behavior with a newfound respect. The young guard performed his duties with precision, discipline, and a quiet authority that drew admiration naturally. He treated everyone with fairness and respect, from high-ranking officials to palace staff, demonstrating that true leadership did not come from fear or money, but from character. For the first time, Arjun realized that influence could not be measured in dollars or assets. He had spent his entire life believing that wealth equaled power, yet here was Rayan, commanding respect through courage and integrity alone. It was a humbling realization, one that forced Arjun to confront his own flaws and the arrogance that had guided his actions for so many years. Determined to learn from the experience, Arjun began to interact differently. He no longer approached situations with threats or offers of money. Instead, he tried to engage respectfully, listening to the advice of palace officials, observing protocols, and attempting to understand the cultural values that shaped the kingdom. Each day became a lesson in humility, patience, and empathy. The change in Arjun did not go unnoticed. Rayan, while unaware of the depth of the CEO's transformation, observed the subtle shift in his behavior. Arjun was no longer confrontational or demanding. He was reflective and careful, seeking understanding rather than dominance. Even the royal staff and palace officials began to acknowledge his efforts, though cautiously. They could see that the once arrogant CEO was trying to align his actions with the values of the kingdom. One morning, during a ceremonial inspection, Arjun witnessed Rayan guiding a group of new guards. The young guard spoke with clarity, patience, and authority, correcting mistakes without anger and encouraging excellence through example. Arjun noticed how everyone respected Rayan, not out of fear, not because of orders, but because of the integrity and fairness he demonstrated every day. It was a living example of the principle he was trying to internalize. True respect comes from actions, not wealth or power. The lesson became even more evident during interactions with the royal family. Arjun attended meetings and discussions, now approaching them with humility and genuine interest. He presented his ideas clearly and professionally, relying on skill, knowledge, and reasoning rather than intimidation. To his surprise, his proposals began to receive consideration, not because of his reputation as a wealthy CEO, but because of the merit and thoughtfulness behind them. Arjun realized that this approach was far more effective than any amount of money could have been. He saw firsthand that ethical behavior, preparation, and respect for others earned far greater results than arrogance and wealth alone. The transformation was not instantaneous, but the progress was undeniable. Meanwhile, Rayan continued his duties with the same quiet dignity, never boasting or seeking recognition. Yet his influence was undeniable. Guards, palace staff, and even citizens looked up to him because of his principles and courage. Arjun, observing this, understood that Rayan's authority came from the strength of character, not position or title. This realization reinforced the lesson he had been slowly learning. Integrity and honor were the foundation of lasting influence. The CEO also reflected on his personal life and business practices. He thought about the ways he had treated employees, colleagues, and clients with arrogance, assuming that money and power could cover any offense. The encounter with Rayan made him see the importance of ethical behavior, empathy, and respect in every aspect of life. Arjun began planning changes in his company, emphasizing fairness, transparency, and accountability. He understood that lasting success was built on respect and trust, not intimidation or wealth alone. One afternoon, as Arjun walked through the palace gardens, he found himself standing near Rayan, who was overseeing preparations for a royal ceremony. The young guard approached him, calm and attentive, and spoke respectfully. "Sir, the arrangements are complete. Everything is in order." Arjun nodded, feeling a strange mix of humility and gratitude. He realized that he had once thought of Rayan as an obstacle, someone to be dominated. Now, he saw him as a teacher, someone whose behavior had provided a lesson in honor and leadership that no amount of money could buy. "Thank you, Rayan," Arjun said sincerely, his tone devoid of arrogance. "You have shown me something I never understood before, what true respect and integrity mean." Rayan glanced at him briefly, acknowledging the words without excessive reaction. "Sir, it is my duty. I do not seek praise, I only act according to what is right." Arjun smiled, understanding that this was precisely the point. Integrity was not about recognition or reward. It was about consistency, courage, and adherence to principles, even when no one was watching. In the following days, Arjun continued to learn and grow. He approached business discussions with humility, listened carefully to others, and considered the long-term impact of his actions. He realized that leadership was not about commanding obedience or buying influence. It was about earning trust, demonstrating reliability, and respecting the people around him. The kingdom's residents began to notice the change in Arjun as well. The once arrogant CEO, who had arrived expecting to bend the world to his will, now interacted with respect, humility, and thoughtfulness. People who had been wary of him began to treat him with cautious admiration. seeing that he was willing to change and learn from his mistakes. Arjun also recognized that true power was not measured by wealth, but by the ability to influence positively through ethical behavior and character. The lessons learned from the young guard, Rayan, became a guiding principle for him. He no longer sought to dominate, but to lead with integrity, understanding, and respect. The story of the slap at the palace gate, once a source of embarrassment and frustration, had become a turning point in Arjun's life. It was a reminder that no matter how much wealth or power one possessed, there were forces, honor, integrity, courage, that could never be bought or controlled. Arjun had learned that humility and respect were far more valuable than money, and that leadership rooted in principle created lasting influence. As Arjun prepared to leave the kingdom, he reflected on the journey he had experienced. He was no longer the same man who had arrogantly entered the palace, expecting submission and obedience. He had been humbled, challenged, and ultimately transformed. The lessons he had learned from Rayan and the kingdom would stay with him for the rest of his life, shaping his personal values, business practices, and interactions with others. Before departing, Arjun sought out Rayan one final time. "I may never have a chance to repay you," he said quietly, "but I want you to know that your actions have changed me. I have learned that some things, honor, respect, integrity, are priceless." Rayan nodded, his calm demeanor unchanged. "Sir, you do not owe me anything. The lesson is yours to carry. How you use it is what matters." Arjun smiled, a mixture of gratitude and humility filling him. He realized that the young guard had not only defended his duty, but had also provided Arjun with the most valuable gift, a lesson in true leadership and human dignity. As he departed from the kingdom, Arjun felt a sense of peace he had never known. He had come seeking wealth, influence, and recognition, yet he was leaving with something far more valuable: wisdom, humility, and a deep understanding of respect. He had learned that no amount of money could erase dishonor or buy integrity, and that true power was found in character, not wealth. The journey had transformed him completely. Arjun Verma, the CEO who had once believed that money ruled the world, now understood the power of principles. He carried with him a new perspective on life, leadership, and relationships. And as he looked back at the kingdom, he knew that the lessons learned here would guide him forever. For Arjun, the young guard, Rayan, had become more than just a figure of resistance. He had become a symbol of the values that truly mattered: courage, integrity, and honor. And these were lessons no amount of wealth could ever buy.